You'll need 850 grams of plain flour, half a teaspoon of baking powder, 3 tablespoons of corn flour, 425 grams of margarine. Find a margarine that has the highest percentage of buttermilk. This will make your pastry taste amazing. The one I'm using has 33%, which is pretty good. You'll also need an egg, 1 cup of whole milk, 2 tablespoons of oil, 750 grams of lean beef mince, 1 kg of raw chicken thighs, an onion, 2 medium carrots, 2 medium potatoes. When it comes to seasoning, I use 3 teaspoons of garlic granules. I also use 3 teaspoons of mild curry powder. I can only find Caribbean, but any is fine. And I also use 3 teaspoons of cock flavoured seasoning, particularly Dunn's River brand, it's really nice. Lastly, I also use 3 cubes of chicken stock and 2 cubes of beef stock. Almost forgot, I also use 2 bay leaves as well as salt and pepper to your preferred taste. So that's the ingredients out of the way. Let's start the pastry. First, weigh out your flour. Now add your salt and baking powder to the same bowl. So you know how in recipe books they tell you to sift the flour first? Yeah, I don't have time for that. So what I do instead is I gently whisk all the dry ingredients together first. And what this does is it just gets rid of any lumps and it brings the dry ingredients together really nicely. After this, I add small clumps of the margarine to the same bowl and just dot it all around. And you want to make sure that your margarine is as cold as possible, so only bring it out of the fridge when you're ready to use it. By doing this, it allows your pastry to be a lot easier to manipulate, and your pastry will also be really nice and flaky. Next, using the paddle attachment, mix all the ingredients together on the lowest setting. But if you don't have this, don't worry, you can use your fingers. I do use my hands from time to time, but for today I just chose to use my KitchenAid. So you mix it on the lowest setting for about 4 minutes until it resembles fine breadcrumbs, like this. Now you want to slowly pour in half a cup of your ice cold milk. I'm gradually adding the milk because I don't want to over flood it and for it to be too wet. So I'm making sure that every time that I've poured it in, I wait a bit and see how it reacts with the pastry. And if it's still a bit dry, I add some more, but half a cup should be fine for this quantity. If your mixture is too wet, don't stress. Just add a tablespoon of flour at a time and it'll be just fine. So this is how you want your pastry to be, basically like sticky Play-Doh. It should come together really easily in your hands. Okay, so you roll out a sheet of cling film on a clean surface, pop your pastry in the center and you wrap it up and put it in the fridge to rest for an hour. People do say half an hour, but I would say do it for at least an hour. That way your pastry would have enough time to rest, and when it's time to use it again to roll, it won't shrink up and it'll be a lot easier to use. If you were to try and roll this pastry now before putting it in the fridge, it would be a nightmare to use. So guys, always make sure that you rest it. Okay, so while the pastry is resting, we'll move on to the mix. So dice an onion, doesn't have to be perfect or pretty or cute, just dice it and put it in the bowl and put it on the side. Now onto the carrots. I'll show you how I'll do mine. So I slice my carrot in half lengthways, and then I'll take one half and I will slice that into long strips, as you can see. And then I'll turn that and I will start dicing. So I'll keep dicing. Here are the size, or here's the size that you would want yours to look like, small chunks. And when I get to the top, it's normally thicker. So all I do is I slice it in half lengthways once more. So it's a fairly similar size to how it was at the bottom. And after I've done that, I will just dice it again into fairly small chunks. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you just want it to be in the size that you imagine it to be in as when you're eating a pie. So put that to the side. Now potatoes, cut in half, and then you cut those into like 1 centimeter slabs. And after that, you cut each slab into like 1 centimeter strips. Turn it and cut it into like 1 centimeter cubes-ish. Here's the size that you want it to look like. Again, all fairly similar, not perfect, but again, imagine what it looks like in a pie. So you have your onion, carrot and potatoes. You can put all of these to the side. Just remember to cover your potatoes with water so that it doesn't oxidize and turn brown. Okay, so if for whatever reason I don't season my chicken the night before, I will do it now. So here I have chicken in a pot and I'm sprinkling over 1 teaspoon of curry powder. Next I will sprinkle 1 teaspoon of cock flavoured seasoning. And now I will sprinkle 1 teaspoon of the garlic granules all over the chicken. Next I'm adding 1 chicken stock cube to the pan and crumbling that over the chicken. And once that's done, I get stuck in, so not afraid to get my hands dirty. I massage the spices really deep into the chicken as much as I can, and once I'm happy with that, I will flatten the chicken and pop the lid on. Effectively what I'm doing now is steaming the chicken. So on the lowest setting, so about 1 or 2 on the hob, I will leave it to sit and allow the chicken to release its juices. Now after 20 minutes, you will see that the chicken has got a golden colour underneath. So all you do is turn them over and put the lid back on and leave it for about 10 minutes. When you come back to your chicken, you will see that it has started to release its own natural juices, which smells incredible. Pour over some water, covering 1/3 of the chicken, pop in a couple of bay leaves and replace the lid, again on a low setting, for about half an hour. After half an hour, check on your chicken to make sure that there is no pink in there and it's thoroughly cooked. If you're happy, pop the chicken back in, leave the lid on and just leave it to sit and cool. Okay, so pastry is now ready to be rolled, so you'll need your rolling pin, something round to cut your pastry out of, so either a saucer or a lid. It's easier to use your lid. I made my life harder by using a saucer in this video, but I would recommend a lid. Also some plain flour, and lastly some pre-cut squares of greaseproof paper to separate your pastry circles so they don't stick together. You can use these again and again, by the way. Take your pastry out of the fridge and you'll notice that it's firmed up slightly, which is perfect for rolling. Lightly sprinkle some flour on a clean surface, grab a small part of your pastry and flatten it with the palm of your hand, flip it over and roll it in the flour on both sides so it doesn't stick. Grab your rolling pin and from the center outwards, flatten it gently guys. I do move it around after rolling it once or twice to make sure that the pastry isn't stuck to the surface. Sometimes the rolling pin can get stuck to the pastry, so I just sprinkle some flour on it. Grab my saucer or a lid, cut around it, remove the excess. Yeah, see, making my life hard. If I had the lid, I could just lift it up. Yeah, so remove the excess. And here is your first pastry circle. So here's the thickness, about 3 centimeters. And I pop it on one of my pre-cut greaseproof squares, put another sheet on top, ready for the next one, and I'll show you again. So you lightly sprinkle a surface, grab a small amount of your dough and flip it over and roll it around on the floured surface so it doesn't stick. Grab your rolling pin and from the center outwards, let your rolling pin do the work and flatten it. If you find that your rolling pin's getting stuck, just go over it with flour. Also, don't forget to move your pastry around so it doesn't stick. If you find that you rolled it too thinly, just push it back to bring the thickness in. Pop your circle on top, cut around it, remove that excess, and you've got your second or whatever number it is pastry circle. Pop that on the greaseproof square. Replace that with another sheet and you're done. Quick tip, I just wanted to show you what you do if you find cracks in your pastry like this. It just means that you've added too much flour and it's a bit too dry, but don't worry, just roll it as you normally would and you will find that the cracks will blend together and it won't cause you any stress when you are using it or baking it. Cut a circle out as normal. And here's what mine looks like after I've rolled it and it's all come together. See? After you've done your pastry circles, cover them with cling film and leave them to rest in the fridge. Now move on to frying your onions. Do it for 3 to 4 minutes until they are translucent. And then you just put them to the side. So what you've done is you've partially cooked the onions and you've also flavoured the oil. And now you add your mince. So I've learned this really cool little trick here. So what I do is I grab 2 forks and I use the forks to mash the mince like bit by bit. And what this does is it allows the mince to disintegrate and be really nice and fine. And I do the whole mince so it looks like this. I leave that for about a minute or so and then I grab my spatula and I go into the mince again and I really make sure that I've broken it all up so there are no clumps. Imagine how it is when you eat a pie. You don't want any clumps in there, you just want everything to be individual. So I break up all the mince and I just make sure that there are no clumps and it's really nice and fine. And after that, I just bring everything together with the onions. Then I add my carrots, my potatoes, and I use my spatula to gently fold it over just to bring it together. Not perfectly, just loosely. Okay, now to make it taste nice. So I add 2 teaspoons of curry powder. I saw some of my Madras curry powder lurking in my cupboard, so I use that because I want to finish it. Now I'm going in with 2 teaspoons of my garlic granules, sprinkling it over, and also 2 teaspoons of my cock flavoured seasoning. Now my frying pan is still on a low heat. I haven't turned it off. Now I go in with 1 of my beef stocks cubes and 2 of my chicken stocks. And now I mix it all around. So what I'm doing now is instead of just adding water, which will just dilute the flavour, I'm actually dry frying the mix. So I'm making sure that the flavour is going into everything as much as possible before I add any liquid. So I come back from time to time and stir this occasionally, leaving it on a low setting for about 10 to 15 minutes. Trust me guys, it works. Makes it taste so good. The chicken should be cooled now, so one at a time I take one out and I debone it. I'll show you how I do it. So in the chicken thigh there's 1 bone running along the center, so I cut off the meat either side. The meat should be nice and tender, so it should come off easily. And yeah, so I'll just trim off most of the meat off the bone. And you'll find that there is cartilage on the top and the bottom of the bone, and you don't want to eat that because it just tastes like gristle. I'll show you here. So like there's the top and there's one at the bottom. And then when I've done all the chickens, I just roughly chop through all of them. So you'll find that you're left with an amazing homemade chicken stock. So all you need to do now is pour it into the base of your meat pie mix, and you'll find that it just covers the top, which is perfect. Flatten it so it cooks evenly, put it on a low setting, and as you can see, because my pan is so big, I make sure that I put one part of the frying pan just over the heat, and then I'll turn it 90 degrees every 15 minutes. So what you see me doing here now is tilting the pan by raising the handle slightly, and I'm just skimming any excess fat that I see in the liquid. Okay, so here the section that's directly over the heat is cooked, so I'm just turning it 90 degrees to make sure that the next part cooks. Replace the lid and leave it to simmer for about 15 minutes. When all the mix is fully cooked, add your chicken to the pan. Now add your corn flour mix by mixing a quarter of the milk you have left with the corn flour. Some people use flour, like plain flour, but I prefer to not use that because it takes a lot longer to cook out and you always are left with some sort of floury taste. Whereas with the corn flour, you just need to cook it out for about 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, and it's completely fine. Stir until it's all liquid. Add a quarter of the milk you have left because the liquid has reduced slightly. I never add water because water just dilutes the taste and it undoes all the hard work you've done into seasoning the mixture. And also milk gives it a nice creamy texture as well and makes it taste so delicious. So first, wait for your mixture to come to a gentle simmer first and then pour in your corn flour mix. That way it will work instantly and you'll see your mixture start to thicken up straight away. Using your spatula, fold the mixture from the bottom upwards to cook out the corn flour and bring it all together for a couple of minutes. Here's a close-up of the mixture. The liquid is juicy but not runny, very important, and you want it to be moisturised like how you'd find a risotto. The liquid is slightly thick, but you should still be able to see it. Okay, so line the largest baking tray you have with baking parchment. Now, baking parchment and greaseproof paper are not the same thing. Greaseproof paper just reduces grease, but your items can still stick to it if you're not careful. But baking parchment just makes sure that anything that you bake on it will not come away stuck to the paper, and this is what you want. Preheat your oven to 190 degrees. You'll need an egg wash, which is basically your egg whisked up, and a pastry brush, your amazing meat pie mix, and your pastry circles which have been chilling in the fridge wrapped in cling film, plain flour, your rolling pin, and a clean fork. Okay, so lightly dust your surface with some of the plain flour, grab a pastry circle and gently pull away the greaseproof paper. It should have a nice glossy sheen. Put it on your floured surface and gently holding the edges, just glide it around so it doesn't get stuck. Lightly flour your rolling pin so again it doesn't get stuck to your pastry as you're about to roll it for the last time. You will notice that when you bring out your pastry circle, it would have again firmed up slightly in the fridge, which means it would have thickened up a tiny bit. You can leave this if you want, but I don't like to have too much pastry in my pies, so I just roll it out really gently. As you can see here, I'm doing it from the center outwards and I'm allowing the rolling pin to do all the work. I'm not putting any pressure on it at all. Next, I spoon on 1.5 tablespoons of my mix onto the pastry disc. A small trick, put your thumbs either side of the mixture. You want there to be a small space around them. This way it will ensure that you haven't overfilled your pie and that it won't burst when it comes to baking. Next, you lightly brush some of your egg wash around the edges to make sure that your pie will hold and stick together during baking. Okay, time to roll it over. So again, using your thumbs, gently lift up the edge closest to you, lift it up gently with your fingers and quickly fold it over. Don't stop and start with this, guys, because it may not work in your favour. Just go for it. Use your index finger as a guide to allow there to be an even space around the edge, and your other hand to just guide your pastry along. Okay, so now the other side. When lifting up your pastry, pinch it from the top corner, use your other hand to support the back and turn. Also guys, you want the top and bottom part of your pastry to meet. You don't want this where the top is slightly behind the bottom because it might mess up when you're baking. So to fix that, what I do is I gently push the back forward, and then with my other hand I will gently pull it down, and it should meet perfectly like this. So again, I'm going to turn my pastry around. So I pinch the top corner, wait for it to focus. I pinch the top corner, gently lift it up. With my other hand I support the bottom and turn it, and that's it. Time to crimp. Okay, so grab your fork and you gently press around the edge. Don't press all the way through the pastry, just halfway. Make sure your fork is dry. I used to dip my fork into the egg wash before I crimped because I saw it somewhere, and it wouldn't take long for my fork to get stuck to my pastry when I was crimping it, and I was thinking, why is this happening? Anyway, don't do that, guys. Make sure that your fork is dry, and if it does start to get stuck, just dip it in flour and resume crimping and it'll be just fine. So this is what your finished meat pie should look like: evenly coloured, hearty size and deep filled. Okay, well done, you've come this far. The final stage is upon us, glazing. Glazing will give your pies a nice golden colour and a glossy sheen. So lightly brush over the top of your pies with the egg wash. Next, you prick your pie twice on the flat surface at the top. So sorry guys, I lost this footage. And then you put it in a preheated oven of 190 degrees Celsius and you leave it to bake for 22 minutes. And it will come out like this. Tender mince and chicken with melt in your mouth vegetables, all wrapped in a flaky and buttery golden pastry. Trust me when I say that these delicious homely Nigerian meat pies are guaranteed to put a smile on your face. Please comment, share and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for watching.